It is good to be here, though. We are going to be starting in lesson 10 this morning. This is intensifying your courage. So the magic word of the day is courage, and we're going to be talking a lot about courage and different aspects of courage, what that looks like, what that doesn't look like, and what it should look like, or something like that. We are excited for you to be here. Thank you for joining us. We are going to go ahead and get started with this, though. If you would, bow with me and we'll have a prayer. Lord, you are our God. You're awesome. God, we are so thankful for every opportunity that you give us to come out here and to assemble with other Christians, for us to be able to look into your word, to study it, to get closer to you through the things that we read, through the discussions that we have. God, help us to be completely focused on you this morning. Help us to analyze this topic of courage. God, help us to think through what that means in our lives. God, in what ways we need courage, how that we can develop greater, stronger courage. And God, just help us to identify those areas in our lives where we're lacking so we can build on that. God, this morning, help us to do what we can to serve you better. Lord, be with all those in all the classes right now, all the teachers, everyone who's joining in all of these lessons. God, help us to come to a greater knowledge of your truth. God, help us to be motivated to take this gospel message and take it to the world around us and show ourselves to be approved through the things that we do. God, just be with us this morning and help us in all that we do to get closer to you. It's in Jesus we pray. Amen. Okay, so when we are looking at zeal, there is no way that we can have a zeal that's going to last if we don't have courage, because courage is a key ingredient, key aspect in our zeal and in what we do. We're going to go ahead and read this verse that's at the top of the page, page 48. So it quotes 1 Peter 3:13. So if someone would care to read that one for us, 1 Peter 3:13, the verse that's there. All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Who is there to harm you if you prove zealous for what's good? Why do we need courage? I mean, what is it about? Okay, well, let me ask this. What's the opposite of courage, would you say? Yeah, being cowardly. It's if you're a coward, you don't have courage, and that's handy because it starts with a C as well. So to get rid of the cowardliness-isms, we need to have courage, and so ways we can get rid of fear. What sorts of things are there, like when we think about our spiritual walk, and we think about what it takes to live as a godly person and to have zeal, what sorts of things do we need courage for? Like what's some of the areas that we are more likely to be fearful in? Yeah. Why is it hard around other people to live a good life? Mm. Because it's kind of confrontational, like when you're living the right life, and especially you said, we're kind of in the minority in a lot of those things. And it's a numbers thing. If you have a bunch of people who are against what you're trying to do, and you're trying to do what's right, that is going to stand opposed to a lot of people. And that can be intimidating. There can be a lot of people, and it's like sometimes it's like I just don't want to deal with this right now. I don't want to have this discussion. I don't want to stand out. I just want to get through my day, man. And that happens sometimes. What other ways do we need courage? What's some difficult areas?
Context of what the early Christians did. So, I mean, for us today, it's being ostracized is pretty bad, but they were facing imprisonment, they were facing execution, torture. So they had quite a bit.
He really did. And so this is like, you look at what they were experiencing. This was, I mean, they had real fear. They had some stuff that was right in front of them. I mean, fear of, we do have the fear of being separated from people, like you said. Good job. But, I mean, they did have imprisonment, death, like torture. Those are awful things. And, I mean, if you had that looming, would that change the way that you respond to things? And, so we see a lot of good examples in the New Testament, Christians who are willing to, stand up for that and to do what was right and what was necessary. That's a very, very good point. What other ways do we experience fear? What other areas do we need courage in? Yeah, amen. That's a tough one. I mean, when you have denominational relationships, like you have people in your family, your friends, and it's like, how much do I want to talk about this? And do I want to rock the boat? And do I want to damage this relationship? Because you don't know how people are going to respond. And maybe you've had some conversations in the past with them, and then it's like, it didn't go so well before, so, I don't want to burn all of these bridges. And so that's a very valid thing, and that's something that we face. Anything else? Other areas of courage/fear? Rejection? Yeah, nobody likes feeling rejected. Like, that's not a good feeling. Like, I think most people like when other people, kind of enjoy being around them. They like to have those relationships, like things to be kind of, nice, and I don't know, comfortable. That might be the word for that. I'm not sure. But rejection can be a scary thing. We don't want to feel rejected. We don't want to feel like people don't want to be around us, or people think that we have some kind of superiority complex or something. So that is very true. Yeah, right, the other side. Yeah, no, exactly. You think about the example that we are. There's a lot to consider with this. We have the matter of our example in how we live, what we do, the actions that we take, but also the words that we say and the way that we are either encouraging or discouraging or whatever with our words and trying to show people the truth and those sorts of things. So there's a lot of balance here with that. There's a lot of things that I think that we have a fear of, and it takes a lot of courage to overcome that. And in all aspects of our Christian walk, I think that there's so many things that we could continue to talk about. I wanted to get this out of the way at the very beginning, so that way hopefully you can think through how this applies in different situations as we go through the lesson. Because it's important to understand courage isn't just, and fear isn't just isolated to one aspect of our lives. There are several different things, several different characteristics, situations where we need courage. And I want us to think about how this applies in all situations. In our personal, daily godly living, like that takes courage. In our interactions with our family at home, like in our houses, like the coworkers that we're around, our evangelistic efforts, trying to reach the people around us, our neighbors. And there's just so many ways that fear/courage impacts that. So I want us to think through that as we go along. The way this lesson opens up talks about like the difference between, you look at how when Goliath was there and he was calling out the Israelites, saying, y'all puny, send somebody to fight. And then all the Israelites were kind of like scared and shaking on the sidelines, was completely afraid. But then David came up, and he was not the strongest. He wasn't the biggest, wasn't the most well-prepared when it came to military service. And he still had the courage to stand up because he realized it wasn't him that was doing the battle, it was God. And this is going to be a key point in this entire lesson. And so I'm going to spoil that point right here. You know, when it comes to courage, sometimes we think it's us against the world. And maybe it is, but really, if you think about it, it's us with God against the world. And that completely outweighs it. You think about this. It's really hard to have courage when it looks like, going back to like in the minority thing, if we think we're in the minority, we think that we don't have a whole lot of support. And, we're the only ones that are doing right, and no one else is, and this is just, we're against everyone. It's like, no. If God is with you, who can be against you? That's the mentality we need to have with this. And that is what should incite courage. And I think that's where we're going to see courage coming from. And we're going to see it built upon there for sure. Revelation 21:8. It shows what being a coward will get you. Revelation 21:8. It is a verse. I don't know how much you know that verse, but here it is. But for the cowardly and unbelieving and abominable and murderers, immoral persons, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their part will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. So it is interesting, a lot of times we look at that and we're like, yeah, murderers, that's right. And liars, well, that makes me a little uncomfortable because sometimes I'm not completely truthful. But the very first word he says there is the cowards. If we're cowardly, if we aren't willing to step up and do the right thing, then our destination is the lake of fire. And really, when it comes down to it, I think it's because of the fact that being cowardly identifies that your trust in the Lord isn't what it needs to be. Because if we are truly wholeheartedly devoted and serving the Lord, then we're not going to be cowardly. We're going to have the courage because we understand God is fighting those battles for us. And I think that's why that's included there. All right, any questions, thoughts, comments through any of that?
Yeah, it's the definition of that is fearful. Fearful, same thing.
Right. I like that. So it's the connection there. Sometimes you really don't want to use the word cowardly. I was acting in a cowardly way. Like, you probably don't say that. But we say things more like, I was afraid. And it's the same thing. We all have fears in our lives, and we all have those things that stand. So, yeah, I don't want us to feel safe by talking about this, by calling it cowardly, like that's someone else. No, we all have been cowards. We all have been afraid and those sorts of things. 2 Timothy 1:7. This is such a cool verse. 2 Timothy 1:7. We'll look at that real quick. When you get there, someone could read that for us. 2 Timothy 1:7. Awesome. Thank you very much. So when you think about it, we talk a lot about having the Spirit of God in us, and that should be a thing. But the Spirit that He gives us isn't one to be timid. It isn't one to be fearful. It isn't one to be cowardly. It's one that has, I like the three things there: power, love, and discipline. The power, we have the courage to do the right thing because we realize it's not the power that we have, but it's the power that God gives us. He is Spirit dwelling in us, and that empowers us because He has the power. It's a spirit of love. We talked about loving service last time, actually, so that's a nice little connection there. We need to have a love for the Lord that will incite us to do the right thing. And the last word seems a little bit out of place at first reading. We have a spirit of discipline. It's like, what? But it makes sense if you really think about it, because when it comes to being having courage and living for the Lord and all that, we do need discipline in our life, self-discipline. We need to make sure we're doing the right things. And that helps us to build courage, because one thing that will stop us from standing up for the truth, standing up for the faith quicker than most things, is if we know that we're living in sin. Like if we know that we've got some stuff going on in our lives that we really don't want people to find out about, and that would just ruin me. You're less likely to stand up for what's right, because it's like, what if somebody investigates? What if they know who I really am? That's why we need the spirit of power, love, and discipline all at the same time, and that helps to give us courage. It's no surprise that a lot of these lessons that we're talking about are very interconnected and interrelated. The Christian life has so many different categories that we need to be working on, all at the same time. And the better we get at that, the better we're going to be in that walk. All right, any other thoughts on that?
Emotions, control of whether you get angry or feel fear, but choose not to act on it. And you can realize that fear is not from God.
That's a really good point. And that quote there on the side, fear is not a fruit of the Spirit, is not. And if we are feeling fearful, that is not the Lord telling us you need to be afraid. It's more of God is helping us overcome those things. And we all do feel fear, and we do experience that. But what do you do with it? Having that feeling of fear, and we're going to see that as we go through the lesson, that experiencing fear and having fear, that's kind of normal. Did you know that, Jesus had to tell Paul himself, don't be afraid? Like when he was in the city of Corinth, apparently he was facing a lot of opposition. But Jesus appeared to him in a vision and said, don't be afraid any longer. Keep preaching my name. I have many people left in this city. And so Paul had to get that encouragement. A lot of people have to get that encouragement. And so everybody has fear. We deal with that. But what do we do with it? What does that make us do? A lot of times, we let the fear paralyze us. And we just think, okay, I'm just not going to do anything because I don't want to mess it up. Well, there's some Bible examples of why that's a bad idea too, and we'll get to that. Any other thoughts up to this point? Start on the top of page 49, looking at 1 Peter 3. Now, this is where our original starting verse came from, 1 Peter 3. But it's in this section that I think is helpful to read as a whole, because I think it puts it in perspective for us. There are some things we should be afraid of, and there's fear has its place, but we need to look at what the source of the fear is and what it's causing us to do. Would someone care to read those verses? 1 Peter 3, 10 through 16.
Whoever desires to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Now, who is there to turn you who are jealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled. But in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame.
Thank you very much. So no matter who we are, no matter where you are, you're going to experience suffering in some ways. Like that is a thing that we're promised, actually. Like when we're humans, we're going to suffer. But the whole concept of suffering as a Christian, suffering because we're doing the right thing, Sometimes, when it comes to suffering especially, if there's something that we can do to stop the suffering, a lot of times we want to do that. We want to be as comfortable as possible. We want to eliminate suffering. But when it comes to suffering for what's right, what we really have to consider there is the end goal. Like, is it worth it? Is the suffering that we experience worth it? And if we're suffering as a Christian because we're doing the right thing, I think he says, well, obviously, yes. You don't fear their intimidation. Don't be troubled. Don't worry about what other people are going to do. Like, yeah, you're probably going to have to suffer, and you're probably going to suffer directly because of what happened, of what you did, of the choices that you make to live spiritually. But don't let that stop you. Kind of connects back to, remember the parable of the sower? And you had the guy throwing seed like on all kinds of grounds, and when he get to the rocky ground, what was the deal with the rocky ground? Like, why did the seed that was on the rocky ground fail? Do you remember that? It couldn't take root. So it was like the roots tried to grow down, but there was rocks there, and so it stopped it. And so the plant was like, I have nowhere to grow except up, so I'm gonna flower, I'm gonna bloom. But then, what the scripture says about that, Jesus' description, is that when persecution comes because of the word, when we face opposition because of what we're trying to do, live in our Christian life, then it just withers up and dies, goes away, because it doesn't have enough firm root. So, what do we need to do in order to be able to avoid that? We need it. We need to be rooted in the Word. We need to be rooted in the Lord so that way we have a solid base, foundation. Verses like this really help. It helps us to realize the struggle is real, but the struggle is worth it. Like, we have something to hope for, and we have something that we are going towards. And I think part of that, verse 15 is kind of pivotal because, we're always going to be questioned of why are you living the way that you're living? We need to have a good answer ready for that. And so we have to be ready to make a defense to everyone that has to give you an account of the hope that's within you. So we have to be ready for that. And that takes courage. That takes preparation. But we need to be able to do that and share that in a way that is, as it says here, with gentleness and reverence. We do that in a respectful way. So I don't want you to think that courage means that when someone comes up to you and asks the question, you're like, well, here it is. It's, no, that's, chill. That's not what, what courage looks like. Courage can look gentle with respect. And that's and actually, I would say that it takes more courage to respond in that way than it does the other way. And again, connected back to the love that we have, the reason that we have that. So, and I get that. We don't want to suffer in vain. We don't want to go through things that aren't going to be worth it. But heaven's worth anything that we have to do, right? The payoff, the end goal is so much bigger than anything we have to experience on the way. Okay, any other thoughts or questions, comments through that? That's a really good point. I mean, fear is there for a reason, and we should fear the right things. And when we think of what we should fear, who we should fear, it's the Lord. And so that is what motivates us. Sometimes I think our fear is in the wrong place. And Satan tries to convince us of fearing other things more than we fear the Lord. And our fear of the Lord leads to courage to doing all kinds of things that we normally wouldn't want to do. So it's a really good verse. Let's consider Gideon. Now, Gideon is somebody, I think that as a whole, we enjoy making fun of Gideon. Because there were so many times in the story of Gideon where we're just like, dude, God is showing you what you need to do. He has proven that he is who he says he is. But constantly Gideon's like, can you show me one more time? Like just a little bit more, and I'll do it. And that's he consistently does that. And again, like in the past where I've looked at that, I'm like, come on, like who do you think God is? Dude, and what are you doing? But actually, going through this lesson, it made me appreciate him a little bit more. It made me think, I'm kind of glad he struggled with that so much, because you know what I do? Same thing. You know, God has taken me through some great things in the past, but the next time something just a little difficult comes up, I'm like, I don't know about this one. I don't know if this is going to work. But then he delivers again. And I think we all have that struggle, and we all experience that in our lives. So really, I think we all probably relate to Gideon a lot more than we would care to admit. But it is interesting to look through and see what happened there. When we first meet Gideon, do you remember what he was doing? Remember where he was? Yeah, so he was hiding in a wine press. He was scared of the nations around because he was like threshing wheat. And he was like working up that wheat so that they could eat. Like, you want that. You want the food. And he was afraid if he did that out in the open, that he would be attacked and someone would come and steal that food. So he was hiding in the wine press, like down below, like you couldn't see him. And he was threshing wheat in there. It was really inconvenient to do that. But it was to protect that. He was scared that someone was going to come in and take it. And then, while he was doing that, an angel appears to him. And what's the first thing the angel said to him? How did he address Gideon?
The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor.
You mighty warrior. As he is hiding in a wine press, like, that's funny to me. Like, how does God say that to Gideon, who is obviously not a mighty warrior? Because God sees what can be. He sees the potential in Gideon. So that's just kind of funny how he addresses him. You see several times in Judges 6 and 7, that's where you'll find this story of Gideon. You'll see several times where it says, like, comes out right, Gideon was afraid. He had fear. And he was worried about what was going to happen and all of this. And you see kind of an incremental change in Gideon. And you never quite see the fear completely gone, but you see that he is willing to take actions. And it's really cool the way that the Lord does this. It's like he leads him through some baby steps. It's like he doesn't appear to Gideon and say, okay, get your army together, we're going to go and take over. Like, that's not what he said. He addresses him, and he says, I've got a couple things for you to do. And I want you to do some things for me. All right, so when the Lord approaches Gideon with this, he's not quite on board at the beginning. Let's look at Judges 6. There is a verse, a couple of verses, that really show you some of the thinking that he has. Okay, so in Judges 6, would someone care to read verses 15 and 16?
So he said to him, O my Lord, how can I save Israel? Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. The Lord said to him, surely I will be with you. You shall defeat the Midianites as one man.
Awesome, thank you. So this is kind of completely opposite of how David was, because David recognized, hey, the Philistines are coming in. We need to do something about this. Goliath, nah, like God's bigger than him. Gideon, on the other hand, the Lord said, no, I'm gonna give the nation of Midian to you. Like we're gonna get rid of them, and they're not gonna be a problem anymore. And Gideon immediately starts saying, hold up. First of all, I'm from the tribe of Manasseh. Like, of any of the tribes of Israel, that would not be the one that we would expect a leader to rise up in. Maybe Judah, maybe a bigger one, but not Manasseh. Like, that's a small, insignificant tribe compared to the rest of them. And not only that, but his family within the tribe of Manasseh wasn't really important. Like, wasn't really a big deal at all. And inside of his own family, he's like, I'm the youngest. Like, I wouldn't be the one to do this. Like, there's so much working against me. But God reaffirms him, reassures him, and says, no, it's you. You are the one who's going to rise up and lead the people against Midian. That's it. And God identified that with, but he didn't just say, okay, no, Gideon, you're going to do it. But when he first spoke in verse 16, the Lord says, surely I will be with you. Like, that's it. Like, that's the reason why he wanted Gideon to have courage, because he's letting him know, I am with you. I'm going to provide this for you. So don't worry about that. And so as you go through this and think through, I really like what's at the bottom of page 49. Because when it comes to having fear and wanting courage, we got to realize we're never going to be able just to like turn off the fear that's in us. We're still going to recognize the dangers, the risks, everything that's in front of us. The question is, are we going to be willing to step up and do the right thing anyway? Courage is not having no fear. Courage is looking at the fear, but still trusting in something greater, in this case, the Lord, to be able to do things even if you are afraid. And that's real courage, and that's what we see, and we definitely see that in Gideon here. I think maybe that's why God spends so much time describing how afraid Gideon was, because when he actually did what he was supposed to do, that kind of makes it more impressive, because we realize Gideon knew exactly where he started, and it wasn't good. But God was able to do some great things with him. Now, there's 3 points at the bottom here. When you realize that you're facing these facts, you're facing the facts of the fears, and maybe there's some valid things there. He's from an insignificant tribe of Manasseh. They don't have much of a ruling. How in the world is he going to amass a following? Like, what's that going to look like? He's the youngest. Like, there's just so much working against him. He is aware of that. But that helps him in the fact that right here, you remember how dependent you are on God for success. Since he realizes, I'm not a valiant warrior. I'm not something special. So if God does anything through me, it's obvious that it's God doing it. It's not me. And so this can help us to be more humble. And so if you are right now thinking, man, all the stuff I need to do, I'm not it. Like, I'm not the person. I'm not, nobody should look at me as an example. I'm not someone to follow, and I'm not anyone who's anything special, and I get messed up on words, and I can't spread the gospel to people, and I can't do all these things. Well, yeah, you can't, because you are pretty insignificant. Sorry to say that. But in the whole grand scheme of things, yes. But it's God who works in you. And the more that we're dependent on God to overcome that, the better off we're going to be, because that's what he expects of us. So it helps us to be more humble and prayerful, because we're going to continue to come back to God asking for help. And that's what we need. The next thing says, you remember that inaction has severe consequences. This is what we started talking about before. When there is something to do, sometimes fear paralyzes us to where we just don't do anything. And sometimes we think that's a safe option. If I just don't say anything, if I just sit back and don't do anything and let the events unfold, then I'm good. At least I didn't mess it up. At least I didn't say something wrong and like completely derail everything. Maybe it's just better to sit back and not do anything. Well, what about the parable of the talents? What happened to the guy who had one talent but didn't do anything with it? Yeah, he was. And his inaction led to his condemnation. And that's what happens with fear. Fear paralyzes us, so we think it's better to not do anything than to at least do something. No, what God wants us to do is do something. Get up and attempt. Because it does only perpetuate bad situations. A lot of times, people are indecisive. And when I say people, I mean me. And like a lot of you maybe are too. And sometimes it's hard to make a decision. And it's like, I don't know which way to go, don't know what to do. And it can be like silly things, like, where are we going to eat? I don't know, where you want to eat. And so this is something that I've started doing in my classes at school, is if there's an option between two things and I'm wanting the class to pick, I will only let them vote for one option, and I say, if you don't vote for this one, then you automatically are voting for the other. So it kind of forces them to, because a lot of times you ask for a vote and like 3 people vote and everybody else is like, I don't care. Like, no, you kind of force them to vote there. So that's a silly thing, but this is a thing. We need to take action. We can't just sit back and passively do that. Now, it also says, you remember that every problem provides an opportunity. And there is an opportunity in this. And this will show the Lord more than most things. Because we remember where we start, and we remember it's God who gets the victory. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the rest of the story of Gideon all wrapped up into one thing, and then we're going to talk about all of that at the same time. So after the Lord appears to Gideon and tells him this, Gideon's like, I need a sign. Like, show me that you really want me to do this. Show me that I'm not just making this up in my own head. Which, by the way, isn't a bad thing. I think he's wanting to confirm that this is really God speaking and it wasn't something else. And so he tells the angel that appeared to him, it's like, just wait right here. I'm going to go get some things. And he goes and he works up was it a lamb? And he brings a young goat, and he gets some unleavened bread, and he goes there, and he has this broth stuff, and he sets it there. The angel says, okay, set it on the rock. He sets all the stuff on the rock. The angel took a rod and touched it, and it erupted into flames, and it consumed it. And Gideon was like, okay, yep, I believe you. That's good. I will do it. I'll do whatever you say. And so then the angel told him, here's what you need to do. You need to go to the altar of Baal that's in the middle of your city, and you need to tear it down. You need to get 2 big bulls and hook on to that idol, rip it down, then kill the second bull that you got, and do a burnt offering there using all the Asherah poles, everything from that sacrifice, and you need to do it there to show that we're now devoted to the Lord, not other gods. And Gideon was like, can I do that at night? I don't want to do that during the day, opposition and all that. So he does it at night. He gets 10 people along with him, and they do it. And the next day, the people are so furious with him. They're like, no, why did you do that? Well, his dad, actually, Gideon's father, stands up for him and says, no, he did what we should have done from the very beginning. Because he's turning us back to the Lord. The Lord hates idolatry, so he's doing the right thing. Sometimes when we take action, and even if it's really scary, and this might seem like a small thing, and it was a small step, other good people will see that, and sometimes they help out, and they encourage us in that. Gideon, I think, was encouraged by what his father said, and encouraged by the fact that the townspeople didn't kill him. That was pretty good too. But after that, God says, okay, now we're going to go to the next thing. We're going to go a little bit bigger. And Gideon's like, hold up. Can you prove to me that that's what you want me to do? And so you have the fleece thing, the fleece with the grass. He's like, I'm going to put a fleece out. And in the morning, make it to where the grass is all wet with dew, but the fleece is completely dry. Or wait, no, it was the opposite, right? The first time, the fleece was wet, the ground was dry. And so he wakes up in the morning, wrings out a whole bowl. bowl of water from that fleece. And then he's like, okay, I see that, but God, don't be mad, but can I get that one more time? Only like flip it, do the opposite. And so God's like, okay, here it is. And so he shows him. Gideon continually reaffirms that this is God's will. And sometimes I think we try to jump into things before considering if it is God's will or not. So actually, I don't know, maybe he was a little bit over the top with what he was doing here, but I think that thinking about it, we need to confirm that what we're wanting to do is actually God's will. We need to take time to think through it. And there's a whole thing on page 50 about how to confirm it's God's will. Look into the Bible carefully. We need to pray for God's will, seek wise counsel, and determine our role, just see where we stand with all of this. Gideon was a really good example of this because he was able to do that. Now, even after this, there was a funny little situation where God takes him to like the camp of the Midianites, and they're about to do that battle, and just right before that, God says, I have given them into your hand. You go and take them. It's like, but if you're still afraid, then you can take one of your friends and go down into the camp and listen to what's going on. And immediately it says, and so Gideon took his friend and went down into the camp. He was afraid. But God showed him again what was going on. And all throughout the story of Gideon, we realize Gideon was not special. Gideon was not all that. He wasn't like some famous military leader. He depended on God all the way through, and that shows the power of God. Working through people who just, they're not, he's not the most impressive of the people, but God was able to work through us, through him. So in the same way, God can work through us. When it comes to courage, really, courage, we need to have the courage, and it's one of those things we build a little at a time. What are some ways, you could be thinking, what are some ways that you can show courage like in your own house? Like what's something that you have been meaning to do that you haven't done that you need to show courage with, like there. Start small, like small scale, and look for ways to do that. And then start branching out, looking for more things. Courage comes down to these moments, these decisions. It's like, am I going to act courageously for this 20-second time period? Like, am I going to do that? Can I do that? Well, God can help you do that. And then the next time, maybe it's, can I act courageously for 1 minute? And then the next time, maybe it's, can I act courageously for 5 minutes? And when we think of it like that, you don't have to go out and fight Goliath anytime soon, hopefully. But you can find little ways to show the courage that God is giving you, to work through that, so that way we can build on that to do some great things later. I was going to ask for your input. If you want to talk about anything, let me know. And get some stuff to me if you want that we can open up class with on Wednesday, Lord willing. If not, we will start in chapter 11, amplifying your energy. Let's get energized. Thanks, everybody.